Hi everyone, welcome to Life is Healing. I'm Lubaina, your host. I am a healing practitioner and I specialize in energy bodywork, shamanism, and astrology. Life is Healing is a podcast where I share my passion for healing. In the last 15 years, my journey has encompassed plant medicine, energy healing, astrology, and shamanism, which are all topics you will hear about. I'll share tips from various modalities and interviews of healing practitioners and stories from all over the world, and a fun astro update in every episode. Tune in and join me for this journey on Life is Healing. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 5 of Life is Healing with Lubaina. I would like to get today's episode started by talking about the astrological update. Tonight we have a new moon in Gemini, and I found the energy of this new moon to be quite interesting because in spite of being in the sign of Gemini, which is airy and light, this new moon has quite a chaotic energy. And it's a little bit surprising because this moon does make a conjunction to Venus. And not only does it make a conjunction to Venus, it's making a conjunction to Venus at the time of its rebirth. This is when Venus is changing from being a morning star to the evening star, and it's considered a rebirth. There are mythologies around this as to when Venus is a morning star, she is a warrior goddess. Whereas when she becomes the evening star, she becomes the goddess of love and passion. So you would think that the moon making such a close aspect to this Venus would be an uplifting and heart-opening energy. However, Saturn is in the mix, and that's what's going on. So Saturn, on the other hand, is making a conflicting aspect to this new moon, which means that it's asking for a price. It's asking for us to pay some kind of debt. Saturn represents karmic debt. It is the planet of karma and obligations and responsibilities. And Saturn always wants to know that you have given your dues, you've paid your dues. So in spite of the airy energy of both Venus and Moon and Sun in Gemini, we have the energy of Saturn coming in, but Saturn is in Pisces. So really the energy is one of rebirth in the form of spiritual transformation. So there's something that we have to collectively look at as to where we are creating conflict within ourselves, and as such, that conflict appears in the world around us. So that's something that we need to be aware of working with this new moon. In addition to that, there is a tricky aspect of Mars in Aries squaring Pluto. So Mars is in the late degrees, it's like in the last few degrees of Aries, and Mars feels very at home in Aries. However, it's a very combative energy, right? And you put Pluto in the mix and they're making a square to each other, which is like a right angle and a conflicting aspect. When they're making that aspect, it creates an energy of tension. And on top of that, we had a bunch of solar flares again yesterday. So if you put all these factors together, this new moon creates it packs quite a bit of a punch. And we can use it to align ourselves to do some really deep spiritual work at this time. And Saturn is not going to rest until we pay those dues and really look at what's going on there and what we have to pay off and what we have to let go of, because Saturn is like a very binding planet. So we want to look at where we're bound, where we're attached. And once we do that, only then, so it's almost like a price that we need to pay in order to get to the energy of Venus, which is one of changing from war to love, from changing to the morning star to the evening star. So if we want to accept and honor this archetype of Venus having her rebirth, we need to go through an internal rebirth within ourselves and look at where we are making war within ourselves first and find how we can transform that into love. And now it's time for the healing segment of this episode. Today, I wanted to talk about patterns of energy that we carry and we perpetuate throughout our lives until we learn to recognize them for what they are and thus be able to let them go once and for all. For example, in my life, I've experienced a certain pattern of toxicity in relationships in the past. And I found this as I work with people as well, that often the origination of this toxicity is not within that one relationship or even the previous relationships. It goes farther back, usually far back into childhood, where we learned something from our parents, our primary caregivers, for example, and we internalized it. Now, we may have processed it, talked about it in therapy, and we might be really aware of something like this, right? And I'll use myself as an example. So I was very aware of the difficult relationship that I had with my father in my childhood and growing up, how that impacted my relationships with men and my relationships in general, right? However, even though I was very aware of it and I could watch it as it came up, it had a certain momentum to it, right? So even if there was awareness, there wasn't an ability to let it go completely until I really understood and stayed with the energy that was behind it, that momentum that was behind it. So these are some of the karmic signatures that we come in with that we have to work through in our lives. It's part of being alive. Life is healing, after all. And what I found was the healing happened as I was able to recognize that this is a signature of energy that I'm carrying, right? And that signature is the lens through which I'm viewing everybody who's coming into my life, and they are matching that energy signature. So there's only one outcome to such a match, right? And that's a repetition of what was happening over and over again in my relationships. And once I really was able to stay with that energy, and once I was really able to see it for what it is, which is it's literally just a movement. It has that momentum. And if you don't keep feeding it, because that's how it perpetuates, is if you keep feeding it. And in the beginning, when you first become aware of your patterns, or when we become first aware of our patterns, it might be difficult to not feed the pattern because there is such a cyclical sort of cyclical and habitual desire, ability, and sort of kind of reaction to do so, right? So in the beginning, it might be hard to stay with it, right? And not perpetuate it, even when we see it. And then we start to see it and we start to feed it less and less and less, right? Eventually though, and this less and less and less doesn't have to be like over the course of a really long period of time, although for myself, it was quite a few years until I was able to resolve this for myself and thus experience a shift in my relationships. So it doesn't have to be like a long period in time. It can be, if you're ready for it, in sort of a faster, more accelerated process. However, as we get to the bottom of it, there's going to be some sort of residual, almost physiological, very contracted experience of this pattern of energy. And then when we are able to stay with that and not react and not respond in that way and keep feeding it, when we finally sort of unhook ourselves and we feel free, we feel completely free. And this happened to me too. There came a point where I was like, wow, I really get it, and things are changing, and I really feel this shift within myself, and it changed my relationship with my father as well as my relationship with others around me. And after that, there was a test. And that was very interesting because I had to meet the pattern again, right? I had to meet it again and not be that response, not be that reaction, not be that person who perpetuates the pattern. And only then is the pattern broken. Broken might be not the best word, but let's say resolved. Dissolved is probably a much better way of expressing that. So this is something that I've encountered on my own healing journey as well as working with my clients. And I wanted to share that with you all. I hope that it was helpful. And let me know if you have any questions about this. Please feel free to reach out in the comment section or to write me an email if you want to work together. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the guest segment of Life is Healing with Lubaina. Today, I have with me someone very dear to my heart and for me, a very special guest. He is my friend, Michael. Michael Crouch, that's his name. He has been a healing enthusiast for over 30 years. He is a chiropractor by license and has facilitated over 30,000 healing sessions, which I think is a lot, and has
Oh, well,
studied and incorporated into his work over 50 techniques and methods. Today, Michael's primary focus is developing a self healing digital course so everyone can learn to use their focus and awareness for healing. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
thank you. I'm honored.
Thank you so much for being here.
Well, we've been talking about this for a while, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Yes.
So, Michael and I know each other because he happens to be a very, very dear friend of my teacher, Daniel Kolotsky. That's actually how we met. The first time we met was the very first workshop that Danny had done, and you were co facilitating. That's how we met, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, what do you feel like talking about today? What do we have in common?
Well, there's so much we could talk about. Um, I think we we alluded to talking about maybe uh, what healing is
Yes.
and how I see it, just so everyone has a different perspective. You ask 10 healers what healing is, you probably get 11 answers,
That's
right?
very true. So, what would you say is your definition of healing?
To
And
me,
can healing be defined?
sure. I mean, I don't know if I think healing could be defined as much as anything else can be defined, which is always going to be somewhat limited because you can't really put words to an experience. You could do your best to explain it. My definition of healing really centers around becoming more whole and really adding the word health. That's really the main focus for me is becoming more whole and being healthier,
Mm,
whatever level you're working with the person or working on yourself. Healing is about becoming whole and being healthy, essentially.
okay. And as a healer, what is your goal with people?
Well, I think as most healers, it depends on what the person is presenting with and what their reason for coming to me is. But
Mhm.
if I'm setting that aside, one unique, somewhat unique thing that I like to focus on is their awareness of the process, of their bodies, of their mind, of their emotion, whatever level we're working on, that they have the part of the healing session increases that level of awareness from a place of ease and safety, of course, because you don't want to expose anybody to deep-seated feelings that they're not really ready or wanting to feel.
Hmm.
But at the same time, can you create a bridge of feeling towards that healing, essentially?
Can you talk a little bit more about awareness and what you mean by their awareness?
Sure. Well, on a physical level, we're really talking about being able to feel what's going on in your body.
Hmm.
And that could be just knowing the right foods to eat or the foods to avoid. But more importantly, from my work, is can they feel what is being held in the body itself?
Hmm.
Can they feel the tension in their body? That's really the best place to start with the work that I do, because tension doesn't have any necessarily direct negative feelings behind it, although the tension can be caused and be holding those feelings. But when you get them to focus on the tension only at first, they don't have to feel any of that yet. And so the first step for me when I'm working with someone over time is to have them start to be able to recognize when they're holding tension, and maybe as importantly, when I'm working on them, can they feel it when it releases? Because
Hmm.
if I feel a tremendous release in somebody's neck, let's say, for example,
Hmm.
and they have no clue, that's very valuable information for me to know how much of the information is getting to the conscious part of them, or the conscious part of their brain if we're talking about the body. And so there are healing methodologies and techniques that one a healer can use to gently increase that awareness, um, to be able so they could start to feel it. And so once they could feel the tension, oh, you worked on me. I would have someone sit down before I work on them and say, well, what does your neck feel like? What level of tightness, 0 to 10? And they say, oh, well, and I even let them touch it with their hands and say, oh, it feels more like maybe like a 7. And then we work a bit, and I help them increase the awareness of their neck. And they might say to me, oh, now it feels actually tighter. Well, of course it's
Hmm.
not feeling tighter, it's just that now they can actually feel what's actually occurring.
Totally.
Once they could feel it, and this is really where for me the magic happens, once they could feel it, they could heal it. And so then we could do a little bit more work and see if we can get an actual dissipation, which more or less has a high probability that they would be able to feel it, since they were able to feel the tension a little bit more for the first time. They're going to feel it release.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that, and I would say that I've had people that I've worked on with like chronic tension in their bodies that they're not aware of at all. And one of the first things they say when I work on them is, I had no idea I was
Mm,
holding this much tension. And the very fact that now they can say that tells me that their awareness, as you're saying, has shifted. And once we're on that track, then they'll be able to feel it even more and more and go deeper and deeper. And then we get into the different layers that are there. And it's cool because to me, it also feels like once they can feel the physical tension and they can really relax into that, then they can start to feel what else might be holding there, the emotions
exactly.
that may be holding there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
More likely is holding it there.
Yeah.
And another interesting point that is worth mentioning is that once they are starting to become aware of the tension, it's really nice to start having them start to look in their body for areas that they can identify as ease or peace. Because
Hmm.
I think a lot of practitioners really almost all practitioners, the main goal is there's something not right and let's get rid of it, essentially.
Right.
That being said, there's you get more permanent holistic results if they become aware of the ease and the peace and they cultivate that. So then the traumas and stresses of life that they can now eventually feel in their body isn't as overwhelming or traumatizing to experience again, because it's in the context of ease and peace. And so once they could start to feel ease and peace in their body, that's when I feel comfortable to start raising the awareness of the not ease and peace. And I help them learn how to do that at home as well.
Okay. And how would you recommend someone doing that by themselves?
Sure. Well, I think any kind of uplifting practice, such as dance or meditation, these types of things where you're creating buoyancy in general, that is going to help support the process. Then I show them basic exercises that were taught to me by one of my mentors, Michael Stern, that essentially has them start looking for ease and peace in their body. And the very looking starts to create nerve connections because they're looking for something they were never aware of, and they were never really taught to look for in the first place. So as they start practicing, even if they're really terrible at it, and most of us are, it still is creating new connections. And so the next time it becomes a little easier, and they could start to distinguish between areas of their body that have ease and peace, or maybe they have another adjective for it. It doesn't have to be ease and peace, it might be safety or comfort. It's really whatever the client or the patient is experiencing and what word describes it best for them, essentially. And so
Hmm.
having them look for it, then starting to have them compare. Oh, I found some peace over here. I found some peace over here. Well, which one feels more peaceful? Well, I think this one feels a little bit more peaceful than this one. Okay. Well, what happens when you touch them together? Oh, well, now the second most peaceful one becomes just like the first one. They shared information and say, oh, well, that's wonderful. Can you find any more places of ease and peace? And so the very practicing and habit of looking for peace in your body is really the most important part. And I have exercises that, like I kind of gave you a sample of, that helps them in that way. But you don't need a special exercise. You really to just be able to identify what you're feeling under your hand. And sometimes when people touch an area, ease and peace, they're not necessarily feeling it under their hand. They're just getting a general sense of ease and peace. When I touch here, oh, I feel a little bit more relaxed. But maybe they don't overall feel relaxed. They're feeling something specifically under their hand and they're using their hand like a microscope or a
Hmm.
lens. Yeah.
That's very cool. I've never tried that with any of my clients, but now I might.
Okay. Well, if you'd like, we can try it I could guide you through it at the end of the podcast if you like. We'll see if we have time.
Sure. Yeah,
I'm open to that. So,
that sounds great.
okay.
Yeah. I'd love to feel more ease and peace in my back.
Right.
That would be great.
It's
That
hard
would
to
be
reach your
awesome.
back, but we could
I can
figure out
the
a
area
way
that
to.
hurts, I can reach it.
Okay.
It's
All right.
okay.
You're a yogini, so you could reach your back.
So, what would you say are some common misperceptions that people have about healing?
Sure. Well, I feel like if we're talking about holistic healing, n-
Yes.
um, and maybe that's also part of my distinction, is I think most, and I'm just going to talk about Westerners right now.
Okay.
And it's really the case around the world, but most Westerners have it the worst, in my opinion. We, as Westerners, confuse curing and healing.
Hmm.
And so the distinction between that is that curing is primarily focused on getting rid of some kind of symptom,
Right.
or it could be getting rid of a disease or a condition. But more often than not, when we talk about seeing a traditional practitioner, it's there's a symptom and I want to get rid of that. In
Yeah.
fact, 85% of all medication is purely symptom relief.
Correct. Yeah. Totally.
And so I think it's a misconception, but I also think it's a subconscious block in a way, because people often don't want to actually spend the time to address the root cause, which is actually what healing to me is all about, is addressing root
Mm,
causes. And so
mm,
what winds up happening is somebody wants to try something more holistic. Let's say they want to go to a healer or take an herb, and they're used to taking a pill. And so what happens, I'm sure you know what I'm going to say,
yeah.
is they're waiting for the instant relief. Oh, I already had
Yeah.
a session with Lubaina. Why am I not feeling relief?
Right.
And the answer is we weren't necessarily addressing the symptoms, we were addressing the cause, and that could take a little bit more time.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I have this experience quite a bit sometimes with people where they'll feel better, right? Like they'll be like, I have more energy, I feel better after the session, I feel more relaxed, but I still have that back pain or I still have XYZ. And no matter how many times you've told them that you're not treating the symptom because that's your doctor's job, right? They're still expecting that. And I think that that might be something that's really ingrained in the brain and in the psychology of people, where healing means not just feeling better but also like the symptoms go away. So like sometimes, as you were saying, if we're addressing root cause, that means there's going to be some stuff that needs to be cleaned out of the way in order for them to really experience a shift around whatever it is that they're working on,
Right.
right?
Often, right. I mean, every situation is obviously different,
Yeah.
but that's pretty much the case. Yes. And so I feel like maybe the misconception of the practitioners, the holistic practitioners, is that education is only a little bit important, when I actually feel like the education is as important as the healing itself.
Hmm.
Because if they're not ready, and if they're not aware that that you're trying to help them with a root cause, first and foremost, to make sure they understand the magnitude of what that problem actually is, and that it's serious enough that it's actually giving you a symptom.
Right. Right. That's a really, really good point that people probably don't think about when they go to a healer.
Right.
Yeah.
That being said, and I think a lot of holistic practitioners are guilty of this. Not guilty is not the right word, but experience this, is that people come in, and one of my teachers once said they come in for a pint of ice cream and you give them a widget. So I think you still have to ride the fine line of giving them some of what they want,
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
unless you're so busy and people know that, you know, you're not necessarily going to get relief right away, um, because we're getting at the cause and more permanent changes.
Right.
Not everyone, but the thing is that that turns a lot of people away until you have this reputation for what you actually do.
Mm,
And
okay.
then they're
Yeah.
coming to you already halfway educated, because your clients were so educated on the ideas that when they referred them to you, they already knew what to expect.
Right.
Um, the other thing that is tricky with this is that I feel like at least 50% of symptom relief is mental.
Mm,
And so if you tell somebody it's going to take a while for you to feel relief, guess what's going to happen? It's going to take a while for
it's
them
gonna
to
take
feel
a
relief,
while.
because you've
Yeah.
now put that in. So now they're expecting not to feel relief. And expectation is actually one of the most powerful healers. We could call it faith if you're spiritual or religious, but expectation is a more holistic, no pun intended, word, because if you're expecting a result, and they did study, in fact every decent medical or holistic study has a placebo group in it, And for those folks who aren't aware of that, essentially, if it was a medication, for example, that's being studied to see if it helps with back pain, and Harvard did a particular study recently, which I'd like to mention in a minute. Um, every study worth its weight has a group that gets a sugar pill instead of the actual medication in this example. And what Harvard discovered was that in those situations, up to 50% of everybody who gets the sugar pill gets the back pain relief, essentially. And so they even took it a step further and had the medical doctor say to them, because normally you don't know if you get the sugar pill or the real pill in a study when you're a test subject.
Right.
In this study with at Harvard, they told the patient,
Hmm.
this is a sugar pill,
Oh,
but
wow.
it's going to work anyway.
Huh.
And 50% of everybody who had that experience got back pain relief.
That's so cool.
Right. So we have to be very careful about what we tell our clients and patients, because
Hmm.
if we tell them, oh, it's going to take 2 months for you to feel better, we're not helping them in that
Right.
way. And so I think personally, I've learned to develop phrases to the effect like, you're probably going to feel better right away, possibly, but we're not looking for you to feel better. We're looking for this XYZ to happen. So
Hmm.
this way, they're expecting to feel better. And of course, it's a lot easier when their friend felt better that referred them, because
Sure. Yeah.
now I found that this was an interesting experience in practice when patients would come to me from a health fair, and I was handing out flyers or whatever I was doing. They would get results, but it would take many more visits comparatively to the people who were referred to me because someone had a miracle or a dramatic healing experience, and then they referred them to me. Very often, I could kind of just kind of almost by the time I'm done communicating with them, they're already feeling better because they're already expecting that result in their mind.
Hmm.
And if you really think about the study in Harvard, it was a medical doctor. They didn't really think much about how do we enhance the placebo effect and have expectation rule the situation. Where one thing I'm teaching in my course is, what can you say? What can you do? What can the practitioner be feeling in the moment to actually enhance the odds of that occurring?
Hmm. Yeah, this reminds me of something that Danny told me actually,
Mm,
and you may have also mentioned it at some point or another during our conversations, but it reminds me of how Danny said, if you believe that you can help somebody with something, then you have a much better chance of being able to help somebody with them, with that particular, whatever that is, right? An emotional
exactly.
issue, something that they're going through. And the same thing for the person who's coming to you. So if they believe that you can help them, then there's a lot less resistance built in, because a big part of what we're working with when we're doing healing work is really working with people's resistance, right? And we all come packaged with a certain level of resistance for all the reasons, life basically, right? Life conditioning and so on and so forth. And what we're really doing when we're doing healing work is, the what I find is the least resistance will give you the best results. Like for example, when I went to Danny, I was like half conscious. This is my first session, right? I was barely conscious, right? I was going in and out of consciousness. So I didn't have a lot of resistance because
Right.
I was desperate. I was just like, take me there,
Right.
and he did. So that's why for me it was miraculous, but I also didn't have any of the stuff that I normally maybe would have come in with, which would be like, do I trust this person?
Right.
Oh, this and that and whatever it is, right? And again, we're terming it resistance. And I found it also for people who get the best results when they're working with me. They just come in there like, I totally trust that this is helping me, even if I don't feel it right away, I trust. Because I have a few people like that. And they're really awesome to work with because first of all, it's kind of this symbiotic relationship, right? Like, because they believe in you, you feel boosted and you're like, okay, yeah, I know I can do this. And it
Right.
becomes like this back and forth. And often, sometimes I really feel like who's feeling who, who's healing who, and also feeling who at
True.
during the session, you know?
True.
Yeah.
Right. The practitioner definitely gets a lot. And I feel like when you're working on healing for yourself, you have your own expectation to work with. So you could try to, it's a little harder because it's harder to trick yourself or change your mindset to expect to heal for
Hmm.
yourself. So it's a lot easier to put that on somebody else in the beginning.
Right.
Um, and so, really, there's another aspect of this is that when you see a healer, there are two people working on having expectation, not just one. So you're starting to kind
Yeah.
of build a crowd around the idea that you're going to heal.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times a practitioner will see somebody who's very resistant. However, it's really just about how much, if you could quantify expectation or faith, how much is in the room. So if the practitioner is able to give a certain amount and the recipient is able to give a certain amount, you add those together and that gives you how much expectation you're working with.
Hmm.
So some practitioners, after doing enough healing work after over the years, can muster enough expectation and faith in their own consciousness that it almost doesn't matter what the patient believes or not.
Yeah.
Because they're, but of course, it helps a lot more if there's two people working on them rather than one.
Yeah, I think it's faster for starters. And then there, of course, are those anomalies who come in and, they may be like packaged with all kinds of things, but for whatever reason. And at this point, I kind of feel like it's a karmic thing, and they come in
Right,
and they have all this stuff, but they're the ones who, like, boom, get
right,
it, get it in sometimes in one session. And you're like, whoa, I did not expect that. They surely didn't expect that, but it happened
right.
anyway, which is cool, because at the end of the day, I feel like we're not really doing much. We're sort of getting out of the way as much as possible.
Exactly. And an excellent way to get out of the way for the practitioner is to recognize their own karma. If you were a hairstylist, for example, I think it's pretty reasonable to think that a lot of people are going to get decent haircuts as long as you have a decent skill. So you don't have to think, "Oh, I need this expectation. I gotta, like,
Right.
muster it. They're gonna get that haircut." It's the same thing with healers. You just expect that they're coming to a healer, you're providing a service, they're gonna be healed, and 1 in 1,000 won't. There's
Yeah.
nothing you could do about it. And so, and that's tricky too because you don't wanna tell all your patients and clients that they're guaranteed healing, but you
Hmm.
also don't wanna weaken their expectation. So
Yeah.
the fine line that the communication is really, really important. And there's some tricks also to help them. For example, if you're speaking to them from behind, so if they're face down on a table, for example, or you're standing behind them, they're much more easily influenced positively
Hmm.
towards healing. If you tell them they're going to heal when they're face down, there's a lot better chance they're going to heal than if you told it to them face to face.
Interesting. Huh. Again, something new that I just learned.
Oh, good. And that's not to discount technique either,
Sure. Yeah.
because I studied, as I mentioned, dozens of techniques, and uh, but I also sometimes wonder, well, is it the fact that now 10,000 people have expectation because they all studied this technique that there's a collective, oh, excuse me, there's a collective expectation and faith
Hmm.
around the technique. So that's why I feel like some people they get this little secret that it's expectation is half the healing, and they want to drop all their techniques and think that techniques are useless, and maybe they are. Maybe it is all about expectation, but did I need to study 50 techniques to actually feel the expectation? Maybe.
Hmm.
Maybe I needed to actually believe it. I needed to study enough of it and see enough of it and see enough people to feel that expectation. And now it's not even a thought. Oh, are they going to heal or they're not going to heal? I'm just assuming they're going to not have a problem healing. And more often than not, that's the case.
Hmm. Okay. So if healing is not curing and we just made that distinction, then what is it?
Hmm. Well, I think it's some people would say it's your system becoming more organized.
Okay.
And so you can, a more organized system can respond better because all the parts are in alignment.
Mhm.
I could also say that it is really connecting to yourself on whatever level we're looking for the healing to happen. So
Mhm.
that could be the body, that could be the emotions, that could be the mind.
Hmm.
So I think it's becoming healthy and becoming more whole. So there's an integration there.
I like that word integration.
Mm,
I also like what you said about the system becoming more organized because I think that we can kind of tie it back to what we were talking about when we were talking about awareness, right? Because as their system becomes more organized, they become more sensitive to what's actually going on within their consciousness and their bodies, and they have a certain level of awareness is the word. They have a certain level of awareness around their system, so to
right.
speak. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then being aware of what's going on. Because if uh, they say, well, what's the first symptom of a heart attack? It's a heart attack.
Mm,
And so are you telling me that this person was going through their day-to-day life and had no awareness that something wasn't right?
right.
And a lot
Right.
of them will tell you, yes, I had no idea. One thing I should mention is that reorganizational healing is actually the type of healing that Dr. Danny Kolatsky's original mentor and my original mentor's work is called reorganizational healing.
Mm,
So that's where that information comes. Donald Epstein is his name.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Brilliant man.
You yeah, I've heard a lot about him from both you and Danny. Maybe one day I get to do something with him. We'll see.
That'd be nice.
So you made me think because I know we've spoken about this because yeah, we've definitely spoken about this. I'm going through this program called Terrain Advocacy Program where you learn how to be a patient advocate for cancer patients who are
Beautiful.
interested in integrative cancer treatment, right?
Beautiful.
And a big part of and the approach is called the metabolic approach to cancer, right? And I have a family member going through it himself, and that's kind of what propelled me to go into this.
Right.
And one of the very first things they talk about in the program is a lot of the times when people get a cancer diagnosis, their first reaction is, I never saw it coming,
Mm,
right? And I never saw it coming just tells you just how little awareness there was around their system and what their system was doing.
right.
Because in order for it, and if we kind of go at it through the modality that Danny and I and yourself we all practice, what we're seeing is that energy drives structure, right? And that the physical level of manifestation, the physical dimension or form is the densest level of vibration. So, in order for it to come into that level, in order for it to manifest on a physical level as a symptom, there are things that are going on in the background that are driving that are creating that, right?
Sure.
And of course, like, we don't want to discount like our exposure to toxins and our
Right.
environment, and all those things are part. That's why it's called terrain, because terrain basically means your environment, your body, what you eat, what you think, like all of it, what you think, your emotions, your trauma background. So it's a very comprehensive system, right? It's a comprehensive approach. But one of the first things is that I never saw it coming means that you need to go back and investigate what is the reason that this happened. What is the reason that your terrain got disrupted? and then to the point where it manifested something like cancer, right?
Right.
So we're again circling back to root cause,
Right.
right? Yeah. So so I just wanted to say that just sounds exactly like it's holistic healing, you know. That's what integrative therapies are.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So now that we've covered what some of the common misconceptions might be, how about talking about some of the common traps that people might fall into when they go on their healing journey? I know I have a lot to say about that, but I want to hear what you have to say about it.
Sure. Well, I think the curing versus healing model is the main trap, because a lot of times what happens is, on the flip side of it, you go see an excellent healer such as yourself, and they do feel better right away, and they don't come back.
Yeah.
They go play golf. You tell whatever you do, don't play golf. And they go and say, "Oh, I played 18 holes. I felt great, and then I came home and felt worse than I've ever felt in my life, and now I need surgery, or
Right.
because they pushed themselves too far." And so there's an honoring that has to happen when you're receiving healing, and not everyone is in a place to really look at it and feel like they're taking care of themselves. I mean, I think a lot of people, that the challenge is that most people want to use their bodies like an amusement park. It's for, it's
I've
for
never heard
pleasure.
that expression.
What's that?
I've never heard that
Oh,
expression before.
that's another
That's
one of my
great.
Michael Stern, who was my go between Michael Donald Epstein and myself. He sort of helped me learn all of that stuff. He would say that. And so he would say that what we want to teach our clients and patients is to look at the body as a temple rather than an amusement park.
I love
And
that.
yes, and it's not always easy, and we can't beat ourselves up for making mistakes and feeling being weak in moments where we do things that we know we shouldn't. And it's really just coming back to the moment and say, okay, well, what's the highest thing I could do for myself right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I would also say from my end, I feel like as a practitioner, what I find to be a common misperception is that people want to give over their responsibility and, in effect, their power over to who they're expecting to be healed by,
Right.
right? And that to me is not what healing is about. Healing is about you feeling empowered to do it yourself. Ultimately, that's my goal. Ultimately, I say this even to clients who are
Mhm.
long-term clients who come often, and they get the work and they really like the work and they get a lot out of it, and so on. I tell them the same thing. My goal is always, you can come every week for the rest of your life if you want, but I will still say that it's your responsibility to heal. It's not
Right.
my responsibility. We we become a vessel, we become a channel,
Mhm.
and they can attune to that. But ultimately, my feeling is, if you really want to heal, especially if there's like something really deep going on, you know, I tend to work with a fair amount of people who have trauma, especially women, and I find like that's also a trauma response, you know, like, you know, they want to feel soothed, they want to feel held, and to a certain level that's good, that's okay, and that's what I'm here for. And at the same time, I want them to be able to do that for themselves so that they don't need me. So I feel
Yes,
like that's a common misperception that people have.
I agree. And the way I address that, again, I learned this from Michael Stern, is really to see it from the practitioner standpoint, that the goal in the beginning is to get the client or patient responsible for about 15% of it.
Hmm.
And then I'm going to handle 85% of it right now. But over time, we want to start to transition it to become where they take over 85% and
Right.
they're getting 15% from me.
Yeah.
Some people are going to land somewhere in the middle and they're never going to take full responsibility, or even most of it. Uh, so then it's really just a matter of what kind of people you want to work with,
Totally. Yeah.
and no judgment. Some people, I mean, I think of some friends who they never want to do any of it. They don't want to do the 15%. You give them
Mm.
you give them homework, and they don't do it.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
it's a different service then, and then it's really more of something I'm doing for them, and um, I'm not really that excited about that.
I was just gonna say, the more I work, the more I feel like I'm the least excited by people like that, and again, it's not a judgment at all. It's just where you're at, and that's completely fine. But I feel honestly a little bit drained sometimes when I work with people like that, and it doesn't feel like the best use of my energy or whatever is working through me,
Right,
and that's again going to be a personal choice and an individual choice based on who the healer is, who the practitioner is, and what their sort of relationship is to the person, the client who's coming
right,
in. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. And I blame the medical model, because the medical model that
Mm,
is designed that way. You go to the doctor, he gives you a prescription, and you take the prescription, and the symptom goes away.
yeah,
And so
totally.
uh, I think about my parents. My dad's 86, and that's how it's been his whole life. And his son and his daughter also being a healer wasn't going to change any of that for him.
Yeah.
But then my mom did change. So
Interesting.
it's everybody's on individual level, and some people like the. I have one practitioner who really just she doesn't want to really see people over and over again to help them, guide them through that. She wants to just fix them and let them move on their merry way. And so I would sooner refer those people to her if she was local and I was still in practice. I would send those people. Maybe it would be a better fit.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, that's also a really good point right there. And I've been thinking about this recently, because I've always envisioned being part of a network of people, because not every practitioner is well suited for you. And if I do feel like someone else can help them better, I don't want to be greedy and hold on to them. I want to be able to refer them to who is going to help them the most, because that way we both win. They win because they get someone who's better suited for them, and I win because then I'm not going to feel like a square peg in a round hole either.
Right.
So that's always been like a thing I've always had in the back of my mind, and which is why like I want to train more people to do what we do, so that there are different, because everybody who takes it, like I know that the way I work is very similar to the way Danny works, just because I have his influence and I've been around him for so many years now.
Sure.
I was his client for 7 years before I even started being a student.
Mm,
So the influence is definitely there, but for sure there's my own flavor in it,
right.
and that's what everyone's going to take and do something with it for themselves and put their own flavor in it. And not everyone cooks lasagna a little differently. So
Exactly. Right. And if 50% is what you're doing on the inside, having nothing to do with technique, that's going to cover a lot of bases anyway. Even if somebody feels like they don't really even have a technique, they don't even really know what to do, there's still a lot you can do
yeah,
for
totally.
people. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, that kind of reminds me of the internal jokes we have about this techniqueless technique and this nameless this nameless
Exactly.
name. We've tried really hard to name this modality. It's just
Right.
so experiential. It's nothing's ever really stuck.
Right.
There've been things that we call it nonetheless because people want to know what it is, but it's not like Reiki has a word. We don't
Right.
really have a particular word for it. It's kind of
Right.
funny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because maybe I'll tell a little story
Yeah.
about Danny.
Yeah, please.
Uh, m- Most of my time in the we went to chiropractic school together, so
Right.
separate from that. But more recently, in the last few decades, Danny would see 50 people in a week, and then he would drive to me and we would work on each other,
Yeah.
and he would show me all the new techniques that he learned that week, because literally every week there would be some new technique.
Something new. Totally. Yeah.
And we both started to see the pattern of the common denominator is results.
Hmm.
So yes, he discovered this amazing new thing, but it was still about the results, and all the ways he was doing it was getting results. So we kind of looked at each other and said, well, maybe it's not just the technique, maybe there's something else happening here. And
Yeah.
because Danny assumes people are going to get better, I think most of the time they do. Now,
Yeah.
that being said, if you're
Absolutely.
sloppy with your technique, you're not going to get as good a result as you could. But I've also known some people with some really, really sloppy technique. They're just not good at the mechanics of healing,
Hmm.
yet they're getting great results.
Yeah, because
So,
they just believe it,
right,
they just believe that they're going to, and that's how it goes for them,
right.
you know?
And so one of the biggest challenges with that in society, in this culture today, is that people downplay or poo poo the idea, oh, well, it was just in your mind. That's the only reason you got better.
Hmm.
And so they look at that as a bad thing. Oh,
Right.
you went to your practitioner and you got healed. It's only because you believed you would get healed.
That's okay.
That means how much healing are we leaving on the table
Right.
in the world, because we're downplaying the mind, because we really only look at the placebo effect in our culture when we're trying to see if an actual technique or an actual medication works, and say, oh, well, we know this doesn't work that much better than the placebo, so this isn't a good medication.
Hmm.
Why aren't we saying, well, okay, this is a good medication? I mean, I don't love medication, but everything has its place. This is a good healing technique. What happens if you work towards having the person believe and the practitioner believe and have expectation? What happens then? And why isn't there billions of dollars of research going into that when it's right in front of everybody's nose that up to 50% of everybody in every study ever done is getting results and has nothing to do with what they're studying? And so
Hmm.
why aren't isn't that the elephant in the room that we need to look at, not so much trying to find a new this, that, or the other?
Is that profitable, though? That's the real
It's not.
question.
That's why there's no money in it.
That's why there's no money in it. There's no profit, no money. Now let's talk about you a little bit more.
Okay,
Yeah. What would you say drew you into the world of healing? What's the story behind that?
sure. Well, I was at Rutgers University getting an environmental planning degree.
Hmm.
And even before that, I was at a different university because I transferred a few times. I was very involved in grassroots organizing for environmental issues
Hmm.
and rallying, setting up rallies, going door to door, canvassing. And the one thing, because I really just felt like I'm most happy when I'm helping. I think most people are. And so why not pick a career where you're feeling good about helping all the time? And so
Sure.
what I noticed was a few years of doing that was that people actually cared about those particular issues, but they couldn't get past their own emotions and stuff to really have enough bandwidth to actually feel good about donating money or signing a petition or volunteering towards a cause. So I
Hmm.
said to myself, okay, well, we're really sunk if people have so much junk that they need to get through to actually want to help the world. And at that point, I had an epiphany that maybe I shouldn't be an environmental lawyer. I should maybe be some kind of healer that could help people with this stuff.
I cannot
And
imagine you as a lawyer.
we'll have an argument with me one day and we'll see.
Okay.
um, so I thought maybe medical school, because my mind at that point, although I was still into the same holistic things that I'm into now, I thought the best thing to do and to make my parents happy would become a medical doctor. and wasn't really sure I'd even be able to get in. But when I realized I could get in and I would get in, I couldn't do it. And
Hmm.
so I uh, went to a chiropractor and watched him work and saw, number one, he was showing up to work in jeans and a tie-dye, ripped tie-dye t-shirt.
Oh, fun.
And there was a line out the door. He was
Hmm.
only working 3.5 days a week. And he loved what he was doing. He was bouncing around with this big grin on his face. And so I said, I think I could do that. And however, 30 plus years later, here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah,
Yeah. You know what's I think I was telling you this the other day that one of my favorite things is there's no dress code in what I do. I can literally just show up in my sweats, because I want to be able to move and I want to be
exactly.
able to navigate people's bodies. Sweats. It's perfect,
Right,
or my yoga pants. I
right,
like living in my yoga pants sometimes.
exactly.
So now we address the question of why a chiropractic school, and that's where you met Danny. You met Daniel Kolotsky.
I did. And we happened to had already, well, both of us went to chiropractic school because of Donald Epstein's work and
Hmm.
his practitioners. Danny actually saw Donald Epstein when he was in practice, starting when he was 14.
Yeah,
And so he had it in his blood already when we had met already. Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. Do you have any fun, cool stories about Danny's work that you can share?
Well, I could tell you that I worked when I stopped practicing because I haven't been practicing for some years. I've been focusing on teaching more.
Yeah,
Um, he was begging me to come work in his office because number one, he had uh, two extra rooms that just stayed empty,
yeah, I remember.
and his voicemail literally said for years, "I'm no longer taking new patients. I'm sorry."
Oh,
And
yeah.
so he was so busy that I think he felt a little bad that he couldn't handle it all and
Sure,
help
yeah.
because he was already working 50 hours a week
That's a
to see
lot.
50 people a week.
Wow.
So after him asking me for a couple of years, I decided to go in one day a week and see some of his people. And I have to say, that was probably the first time I felt intimidated around healing because the difficult cases that Danny attracted where he got great results for them
Hmm.
is like nothing I've ever seen, to be honest. And so there were things that he could never um, claim because he would be practicing medicine without a license. So it was really an unspoken thing that people would be referred to him because all these things would happen, and it gets pretty extreme. I mean, there were several cases of people who had genetic uh, illnesses or predispositions or towards illness or disease because of something genetic. So it's a genetic cause
Hmm.
and impossible to fix. Yet they would get fixed, and
Hmm.
it got to the point, and the reason I stopped working there because it got to the point where this young couple brought in their deaf son asking me to fix his hearing,
Oh,
and of
wow.
course I wanted to, but that to me was a bridge too far. It was just too much pressure. Uh,
Totally. Yeah.
where Danny lives in that. And
Hmm.
so he doesn't make any claims. He doesn't tell you you're this, that, the other's going to go away. He just works on you. And these crazy results.
Miracles.
Yeah, miracles.
Miracles.
Yeah, literal miracles. And so consistent. Because I
Yeah.
think every practitioner has a miracle happen now and again.
Yeah.
And maybe if they had more expectation, it would happen
Mm.
like it does for Danny. Um, but Danny is definitely the person who I think, in terms of results like that, is leading the pack in being able to do that. And I know a couple of other people that, and I would include you as one of them, where results are very common. Um, I think Danny just takes it to a new, he takes it a notch above everybody else I know, and I know other practitioners who people have the holistic experiences that are just as great and sometimes
Hmm.
greater.
Yeah.
Um, but Danny is a special practitioner for sure, and that's
Yeah.
why we've encouraged him to teach it.
Yes, and he has over the last few years he's taught more and more, which is exciting because I feel like it's great when people get access to learning how to do it.
Right,
However they choose to do it, they might never become a practitioner themselves, because not everyone necessarily wants to be a practitioner, but you can learn how to do it for yourself, and sometimes for those around you. It's I mean the model, and I think that's one of the reasons why we get and Danny gets the kind of results he does is his model. He's not looking at the symptom, he's not
right,
claiming anything, because again, we're not medical doctors,
right,
but it's going to the root cause, and it's going even I would say even beyond that, because we're really looking at the realm of spiritual healing.
right.
That's what we're looking at. We're not looking at the body as just body, and then there's some emotions, and then there's that has energy, because emotions is energy in motion. It's more really understanding how we function as a vessel, and how we really are experiencing the world through our lens of consciousness, and how the physical form sort of reflects that. And then it's really cool, because then we get to use the form to elevate that level of consciousness and
Mm,
experience things differently. So I think a secret behind his success is also the model,
right,
and of course the faith and belief and expectation. I mean, I
right.
know that that's helped me a lot in my practice as well, because I keep going back to that, because sometimes it's easy to get distracted, because people come in with some things, and you're like, I just want them to feel better, because you
Right.
feel so bad that they're suffering. And and I think, I mean, for myself, I definitely identify with the wounded healer archetype, so
Mm,
I like really feel people's pain, because I'm like, oh, I feel it, been through it, it really, really affects my heart. And I just want to go in and like help them,
right.
and at that point, it's circling back to what we were saying, remembering what the actual model is, remembering where that all of it has a purpose, really. Like, nothing is by coincidence, nothing is by accident,
Right.
or everything is by coincidence, and everything is by by
Mm,
accident. And then we live in a more miraculous way when we approach healing and life like that. And that's why this podcast, Danny's the one who named this podcast, by the way, because
oh,
yeah, I was telling him that I'm going to start a podcast, and I want to interview people who are healing practitioners, and I want to talk about this and that and the other thing. And he's always very encouraging, and he was like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to look for a name for it, I don't know what I want to call it. And I had like all kinds of ideas, and he was like, how about life is healing,
mm,
because it has so many layers of meaning to it,
right,
because life itself is the healer. Life
right,
is a healing journey. Life
right,
heals, so
right.
that's why.
And in context to this conversation, getting people off of the addiction to the practitioner, it's
Yes.
already embedded right in there because you're not saying Lubaina's healing, you're saying life is healing.
Yeah. And then we just throw in with Lubaina, because I'm hosting it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Do it with me.
Let's heal together.
Right.
All right, this is such a great conversation.
Oh, good.
I'm so happy that you came and chatted, and I hope you come back, cuz I could talk about this stuff with you for hours and hours.
I agree. Anytime
Yeah.
you wanna have me on, I'm open.
Okay, so do you have any last things that you want to say that maybe we didn't touch on that comes up for you?
The one thing I wanted to mention, because I mentioned expectation and faith a lot, I consider faith and expectation an inner virtue,
Hmm.
something that is inborn. It's not something we need to cultivate, we just need to bring it out. And
Hmm.
it's not the only virtue that heals.
Hmm. Okay.
because love heals,
Hmm.
gratitude heals. And they actually have studies on gratitude. I can't recall them in the moment, but that if when feeling gratitude, you can heal yourself. And there's a lot of virtues that are like that: love, connection, patience, presence, kindness, forgiveness, gratitude, sympathy, uh, finding your purpose can actually muster up healing. Um, uh, Having a quiet mind
Mm-hmm.
and confidence.
Yeah.
So there's not just one. Expectation seems to be the easiest one when it comes to a practitioner working on yourself, on working on somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if faith and expectation is really a great virtue when you're working on yourself,
Okay.
because it's not so easy. If you could do it, it's great.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like you're messing with your own mind trying in a way, or at least that's how it feels to me, that I'm trying to have faith in something that I'm not really sure about,
Okay.
because it's a lot easier to feel expectation when you're working on someone else, or expectation that someone else is going to be able to help you because they've helped thousands or hundreds of other people. But can you feel gratitude? Can you feel love? And so feeling it, and for those practitioners out there, to practice seeing, experimenting, well, which feeling, which virtue actually gets the best results. Maybe it's not expectation for you. Maybe it's just being in love, or that vibe of seva, or selfless service. If you could
Hmm.
feel like you're just serving a higher purpose, you might not need to conjure anything. It's just coming out of you. So it doesn't have to be what happens in these studies. It's really just accessing the inner virtues for healing, essentially, is how I want to clarify the context of expectation.
Yeah. Thank you. For me, it's devotion.
Devotion.
That's been it for me.
Yeah, if you're devoted and you're gonna do like a mama bird, come hell or high water, I'm protecting my chicks. If you're a healer like that, which I know
Yeah.
you are, um, a lot can be done. So standing tall for your clients is a healer in and of itself.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's the best thing in the world.
It's beautiful. And why not practice feeling virtues all the time? I kind of feel like that's what practitioners' biggest gift is that they get to spend a certain amount of time throughout the day focused and present and loving and grateful, or whatever virtues they're accessing. And sometimes I think we needed that help, because we wouldn't have done it any other way, other than trying to help other people and then feeling these feelings. But feeling gratitude all day long is a pretty powerful healer. It really is.
It really is. And I would like to say in closing that this conversation has been so uplifting for me, and I
Mm,
can feel your virtues in embodied and in action, like that. It's a vibration that you're giving off, and it's like it's pulling me up, because I
mm,
feel charged right now, and I'm like, when's the next person coming in, because this is going to
exactly.
be great.
And that's why hopefully by the time people see this, or when you're seeing this podcast, that there's a Danny workshop near you. And if not, we could organize one.
Oh, yes. I have some ideas. I'm going to talk to you about it
Okay.
offline and then
Okay.
talk to Danny about it and see how he
Wonderful.
feels. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. And stay tuned, because Michael is going to be releasing the course, the self healing digital course that we spoke about, called Sankalpa. And there's more details on that to come. And thank you so much, Michael,
Thank you.
for
You're
joining
welcome.
us today. It was
I
so
had so much
wonderful.
fun.
Thank you. Really
All right.
fun.
Have a great day.
All right.